So we have the go. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in and taking out your precious time. I'm Piyush, your host, and today we are talking about a very insightful topic for career training schools. Why do 75% of the student inquiries drop off? Not only do they not convert, but we see colleges and institutes spending a lot of marketing money, marketing dollars, leads signing up on their website, and then them just not picking up the phone, forget about converting. So how can we solve this problem? And this, in terms of deliverables or in terms of takeaways, we aim to help you understand how can you streamline your speed to lead process, how can you provide quick answers to burning questions for your leads, the importance and significance of establishing immediate rapport with prospects. And this generation has a lot of phone anxiety, and not just the leads, but also the advisors as well. So how can we alleviate phone anxiety among newly submitted inquiries? And throughout this session, you'll be getting interactive polls. Feel free to give out your responses. And here are some hygiene rules before we start. So you would notice that all of you are on mute. You cannot unmute, but we do want your inputs. So please use these polls and please use the comment section to be able to tell us what you're thinking about. You can also use the chat function to ask questions. We'll be taking questions at the end of the session. At any point of time, if you face any issues with volume or audio, just hit settings on this window and you can change your volume, change your audio devices, and everything will be good. If you are stuck anywhere, just put it out on chat and one of the organizers will help you. Once again, hello and welcome everyone. I'm Piyush, your host, and welcome to this very insightful webinar by Lead Squared. I am the business head for FloStack, which is a product by Lead Squared solely focused on increasing lead engagement and accelerating your conversions at the top of the funnel. As soon as a lead submits a form, we give them one personalized microsite wherein they get direct access to the advisor through welcome videos. They can book appointments, campus tour, request callbacks, chat, and stay engaged and eventually convert with you. The idea is instant lead engagement. So let's talk more about the topic, and let me start with the panelists. So welcome, K.A.T. Belletty. Thank you so much for joining us. K.A.T. is the founder at Motivate with K.A.T. Now, some of you might assume K.A.T. is short for K.A.T. We will delve deeper into that. And she actually works with a lot of enrollment advisors across the career training school space and also with admission leaders, and helps them enroll and retain more leads. Welcome, K.A.T.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Also, welcome Burke, my good friend, and also the Chief Operating Officer at Gurnick Academy of Medical Arts. Gurnick has 6 campus locations and offers courses in healthcare across diploma and certifications, as well as bachelor's and master's degree. I've had the opportunity to visit one of the campuses and was completely blown away by the very student-centric experience that Burke is building there. Welcome, Burke.
Thank you.
Great. So let me go deeper into that. So K.A.T., Motivate with K.A.T. The primary assumption is Motivate with K.A.T., which is short for K.A.T.,
Yes.
but it holds a deeper meaning.
Absolutely.
Do you want to tell us what inspired you to start Motivate with K.A.T.?
Well, first off, K.A.T. actually stands for knowledge, ambition, and tenacity. I have been in higher education, specifically the career education sector, for almost 18 years. I started off as an advisor. I've led different teams. I was a regional, traveling to multiple campuses. And I think I've held almost every position, having to do with admissions. But what I've noticed when I look at a lot of training programs, what I notice is a lot of people don't talk from the admissions standpoint. Our advisors, they go through so much on the phones with your potential students when it comes to metrics and meeting expectations. There's a lot that goes into just dealing with one potential student. And sometimes that can cause admissions to not be so much fun anymore, because everything is so focused on expectations and numbers and enrollments. And now we're missing the student part. What is the student's story? And so I created Motivate with K.A.T. because I feel like admissions advisors and leaders, they need more motivation. There's a lot that goes into this role. It's not for everyone. at all, but it's a very fulfilling career path. So through my training program, I'm able to not only teach advisors and leaders how to communicate effectively, but I believe in nurturing the person first, dealing with the roots of who you are so that you can now communicate more effectively with the people that you serve.
Excellent. Thanks again, K.A.T.
Absolutely.
Burke, apart from having the very serious and prestigious job of a CEO at Gurnick, you're also a hockey enthusiast, which I found very interesting and intriguing. Also, you're a goalie development leader at US Hockey. Now, I know we would want to talk about your day-to-day at Gurnick, but why don't we start off with that? And let me open it up with a very interesting question. What are the similarities or differences that you notice between a goalie and an admissions advisor?
That is a great question. I've never really thought of it that way before. In working with so many kids, aged 8 years old to 16 years old in their journey to become the top of be at the top of their craft and what they do. I do think that there are a couple things that are similar. One is absolutely mindset is first. And if you don't have that mindset of, what is the job in front of you? What do you need to do? And if you're not visualizing it, you're not really approaching it with a very deliberate mindset, it can be a challenge. And, I think the other is knowing that you are the last line of defense and at some point comes the first line of defense. So attention to detail and being able to have the great mindset at the outset. So those are very important things, but it can be a very lonely position in the game itself, as everyone else is doing something quite different than what your job is. So yeah, it's a very mental position.
Great. Thanks, Burke. Thanks for running us through that. So now we'll head into the webinar, the main topic. We'll bring back the presentation. Once again, thank you so much, VC audience still pouring in. Thank you for taking time out for this webinar. It will be extremely insightful. We are talking about real trends and innovations happening in the admission space. And specifically, we are solving the problem of why are inquiries dropping off? Why are they not picking up the phone when your advisor calls them? Why are they not eventually converting? At one point of time, they were extremely hot in their evaluation. When they filled up your form, when they were on your website, when they hit that request more info. Now, why are they losing interest? And why are they not picking up the phone when the advisors call them? So let me start with K.A.T on this one. Now, K.A.T, you speak very highly about a student-centric experience. It is extremely important, not just to engage and enable students in the admissions journey, but even post-enrollment, ensuring they start with you and eventually they complete with you. I would just love to hear your thoughts on what a student-centric experience means from your perspective, and what are some of the trends that you're seeing in this space?
Well, one, when it comes to being student-centric, is making it all about the potential student. And I think sometimes we have gotten away from that. It's become all about the school and the different accolades and the awards and where the school is placing. And the bottom line is your students do not care if they do not understand what's in it for them. So when it comes to rapport building, that is so critical when it comes to the admissions departments, right? Being able to ask the right questions, the whys behind the whys. So this also ties into when it comes to getting them into the right program. A lot of times advisors, let's get real, when it comes to our admissions advisors, if you're an online school, their agenda is to get the student to enroll on the phone, right? When it comes to brick and mortar, the objective is to get them to come in for a student tour. But when the student actually answers the phone, the advisor's mind automatically goes to the end result, either an enrollment or a tour. But what happens to the middle? The meat is missing, and a lot of times when it comes to our students, they automatically know that when they get on the phone with a school, their objective is to try to get them to either enroll or show up. And sometimes students are like, okay, who is going to make this situation about me? Is it about you or is it about me? And sometimes when it comes to active listening, this is where that plays a role, because even though you may have an agenda, if you are actively listening to a student, that means that your dialogue is going to shift at some point if you're really understanding what the potential student is saying, right? A perfect example, someone is saying to you, you know, I want to attend your school. I've tried out 8 different schools. None of them have worked out, but I saw your website. I'm excited. This is going to be the moment. No advisor should answer that question and say, oh, well, perfect. We're going to be able to help you get into the program. That's an opportunity to say, hold on for a second. Let's discuss those 8 schools, because you're not trying to be school number 9. You know, the same thing when it ties into, you know, a student who's saying that they graduated from high school last year. They're a dependent student, no kids. They're living at home with mom and dad, and they say to the advisor, you know what? My parents are not on board. The next thing should not be, well, let's come in and see what financial aid says. No, you need to have a conversation about what's going on with your parents, because if they're not on board, guess what? You don't have an enrollment. You know, so I think some of the anxiety that comes into why students aren't answering the phones is because they already know that there's an agenda and they want to skip all of the fluff. Our students already know what to expect.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'll come back to that. You know, we'll talk about following a process, following a script versus really having empathy for the prospect. And that's a great point that I'll come back to. But Burke, on the student-centric experience, you know, I had the chance to visit your San Jose campus and meet you. And as an outsider, not only just best-in-class facilities, but I got a real taste of what student-centric experience really means in practice. You know, we were talking about murals and photographs on how, you know, the medical field started and why nursing is extremely important and what is the impact, you know, vocational nurses have on the society as a whole. We were really talking about a student-centric experience whenever a student who's enrolled or who has come for a campus tour visits your campus. So do you also want to talk about some of these amazing practices that you're putting in at Gurnick, and again, some of the trends that you've seen in this field?
Well, you know, I do want to just first of all tag on to what Kathy was saying. You know, the way we kind of approach it is we talk about trust and establishing trust with the leads. Now, you know, talking about introducing them to our school, talking about introducing them to programs and the future and the rest of it, that's certainly one part of it. But, you know, it depends on how do they look at you. And I used to do this like little role play. I'm going, okay, are you looking at me like I'm a salesperson and I'm selling you? Because if you look at me and I'm wearing my sales hat, then I'm looking at you and you're going, I am the buyer in this situation. So how are you going to sell me on this? And all of a sudden you've got an adversarial relationship. You don't have an open relationship, etc. And where does that come from? It comes from demonstrating a competence, knowing what you're talking about, knowing that you're not reading from a script, knowing that you've been there and you've done that and you can tell a story. And then, of course, what's your motive? Like if, you know, you have your competence and you have your motivation, and what's my motivation to talk to you? And if you don't have both those things together, you don't have trust. And then you have the buyer-seller relationship, and it's a bad place to be. It's a terrible place to be. So yeah, so for you know, in on the competence side, being able to, you know, have really engaging conversations and tours and not starting from scratch. Most of our tools that we use to start conversations with students, sometimes they spend time with us in questionnaires. Sometimes they spend time with us engaging in maybe an online text chat. Sometimes we get a sense based on engagement, and we use Lead Squared, of course, but, you know, being able to take a look at engagement scores on, you know, what landing pages are they hitting, you know, what resources are they looking at, what are they viewing, and not starting from scratch. being able to say, hey, I saw that you had some interest in here. You landed on this page for a while. Not just what can we do for you, but, leading with most people who look at this are interested in X or Y. Is this something that you're interested in? So number one, making sure that they're heard, they're not being repetitive in what they're having to tell us. Like, are our ears plugged and we're not listening to anything? And I'm going to ask you all the same questions once again. That's like a recipe for, you guys are a sales organization. You really know what's going on. So being able to engage right on the front line with the tours, getting them as quickly as possible into hands-on, getting them, again, that whole engagement process, meaningful engagement is time spent. And there's a certain point where you have time spent, time spent, time spent. They're not going anywhere else. They've spent enough time engaging with you that they trust you. They're not going to go anywhere else.
Right.
So how do you build that quality time with them on the front end so that they don't go anywhere else and that they're feeling like they're taken care of and heard and they're trusting you for those two components I was talking about? So yeah, combination of things, Piyush, of course, getting them in for the school experience and the tour, but we're also making sure that they're able in some of these sessions that they get to talk to employers, that we'll have employers on site for larger gatherings or for online events and things of that nature, but also making sure it's not necessarily your admissions team that's driving everything. It is the credibility of your program, people who lived this career, who have experienced this career and are still connected to it through your clinical rotations. So they know better than anyone. And in my past career in consulting and business development and those types of things, I've had introverted engineers who are the CEOs that developed a product, and they're going, yeah, I need a sales team. I go, no, you're the best salesperson that could ever exist. You've lived it, you know it. You're going to talk about it from a place of credibility. And this is what we also need to do at our schools, is to come across like that and not sales hat, buyer hat.
Great point. Just taking that one step further, and Kathy, you work with a lot of admission advisors across different verticals. I would love to ask you about this, because advisors are always under pressure of converting, pressure of ensuring every conversation, every pitch goes as per a certain script or a certain structure. And that somehow translates to following a script rather than having any sort of empathy. Now, while talking to these advisors, how do you balance that leadership versus advisor mindset?
Well, I think sometimes when it comes to the advisors, some of the setbacks is because they don't know what questions to ask students and they don't know what's appropriate, right? So a lot of times you would be listening to a call and the student is either giving you like the deepest, most tragic story of their lives, and it just gets bypassed. It's kind of like on to the next question. Right? Because in an advisor's mind, they're so under pressure to enroll, they're not even thinking about if this student is actually a good fit for the school. It's, I need to stack my class, and whoever falls off, right? But also when it comes to scripts, I know this is a very controversial topic because some schools hate them, and some schools live by them. Is it possible for you to believe in something that you dislike? I think it is. Because I dislike scripts, but I believe in them. The reason why I dislike them is because they're not used appropriately. So you may have some schools who would ding an advisor because they missed a word on a sheet of paper. Or they're like, that's not what that sentence said. So now you're missing the student story, and the advisors are in a seat where they're like, okay, yeah, that's great. I got to make sure that I get everything that's written down on this sheet. But now if a student says something to you, there should be certain things that make you stop in your tracks and say, hold on for a second. Let's address this right here. And this is why so many students are misplaced in the wrong programs, because I think it's important that we understand Students will request information for programs that they know nothing about because someone told them that it was a good idea. Or they looked at the title and they're like, "Ooh, that sounds cool. Let me enroll in that program." Now they get to your advisors, they get into the program, and 2 weeks into the course, they're saying, "Oh my gosh, this is boring. This is not what I thought it was going to be." Now you have a drop. It should have never gone past the admissions team in the first place. You know, if someone is telling you that they want to do medical assistant, but then they don't like people, but then you have them in a position where they're upfront with patients. We have to get back to the point where we're getting students to understand what these programs entail, learning about the student. What is your personality? What are your likes and dislikes? And then pairing that to the perfect program that's going to meet their needs so that when they start, they not only enjoy it, but they actually graduate and enjoy the career path that they're taking. So I think sometimes we just need to roll it back and kind of get away from the enrollment expectations and the numbers, because that's what your advisors are going to think of. They're going to say, if I don't meet my expectation, I'm going to be looking for another job involuntarily. You know, and I came from that type of environment, and it's not a sweet spot at all. So I think training and nurturing goes into that.
Excellent point. Now, you know, it's a great scenario where your advisor gets a chance to pitch to your, you know, inquiries that are submitted on your website or through your landing pages. But we spoke to a lot of colleges and we noticed that there are lots of inquiries who did submit a form with intent, but they are never contacted. And, you know, there are contacts attempted, multiple contacts, unanswered phone inquiries. Burke, let me start with you on this. How can institutions handle this issue of unanswered phone inquiries? Because the lead clearly had intent when they filled a lengthy form and submitted their info. What goes wrong after that?
Well, I think one great place to start is with analytics and really trying to understand what makes up a cohort. Lead inquires. What is a typical lead cycle? You know, at the front end, you're right. People inquire because they have a purpose, an idea, they've got a concept. Timing might be off, but they have a concept of what it is that they're inquiring about and what they want to do. And so you've got a whole series of people who are tire kickers at the front. You got people who show more intent and have a little bit more connection because of maybe referral to the occupation itself. And then you have people, and it's usually, I don't know, I would say probably about 3 to 5% that they call you and like, I want to start next enrollment period. How do I get going? But that's 5%. And yes, you can have an admissions team completely on speed to lead. Just give me more leads so that they can find those 5%. But in reality, what you're saying is, yes, it's you can burn leads, you can turn them off. And then what about that plethora of leads that really need to be nurtured? So I think the first thing is making sure that your communication strategy really takes into consideration when you're trying to communicate with them, how you're trying to communicate with them, day of week, time of day, topic of conversation. You've got to deliberately vary that. And lots of experiences on that side of how that can make a pretty significant difference. The other side is again, with your analytics, we're finding that, you know, with one of our more popular programs, that we're taking a look at leads 18 to 24 months ago that were created. And we enroll every 6 months for this program, and we're noticing that anywhere from 3 to 5% of those leads from about 18 months ago are in that current cohort. From 12 to 18 months ago, that's another 3 to 5% are in that cohort. And yes, as you get closer to the more recent leads, that's going to ramp up in terms of what is the composition of your cohort enrollment. But that just tells you how much gold is actually in leads that really need to be in some type of more deliberate nurture status. And so that's one of the things that we've done is tried to identify appropriate segmentation of our nurture based on how people come in, how they've engaged with us, the types of questions, where they've gone on our website to say, yeah, this is more likely a financial nurture. This one is more of a job situation nurture. This one's more of a, and you can get as granular as you want, but if your marketing team is able to go, all right, let's put content out that is going to help these people start to understand more of the options they have available, and that we are seen as credible, trustworthy, good motive, and there isn't a big fat call to action in front of every single one of our screenshots with them. Click here to enroll, enrollment going on right now for a start on April 1st, So that is a really important thing, is to be able to take those leads, the interactions, and being able to meet the leads where they're at and demonstrate credibility and allow your nurture to specifically address their concerns so that they come back to you, and in your CRM, note when they're starting to come back to you through a nurture campaign. Note what they're looking at. Note what podcast, or note what blog article, or just understand what it is that's super interesting to them. So that's what kind of the overall approach. And again, it does come from analytics, and then it gets into your overall strategy and behind the scenes to get to those people.
Yeah, I think great point. Technology has a very important role to play here. We can't just be shooting in the dark. And you mentioned another great point about speed to lead as well. And people often assume that first to contact, first to contract, but it is not often the case. It is also about enabling prospects and engaging them even before that first call happens. Because when they clicked on request more info, they had intent at that point. Now, post that, they have their day jobs, they get busy with something else, and they lose that, motivation that they had while filling up the form. So how soon can we enable them or engage them so that they can continue their evaluation? And this is a great point wherein, we will put up our poll 1 for the audience, and we would love to see their insights on that. While, Kathy, I open this up to you while we wait for the insights. So while speed to lead is extremely important, are we encouraging advisors to reach out as soon as the inquiry comes in? Is there a better way to do it? And what kind of role technology can play in, bettering institute speed to lead?
Well, here's one that I think that we all have to understand first, especially advisors, because they hear this term all the time: speed to lead, speed to lead. And when you really think about contacting a lead within 5 minutes, is it really possible? No. Not if you have over 100 leads in your queue and every single person picks up, right? Yeah. But I think it goes beyond the first person who calls the student is the one who obtains the enrollment. No, it's the first school who makes the connection with the student is the one who obtains the enrollment. The reason why I say that, we know our students are habitual shoppers, okay? So 2 o'clock in the morning, they're completing lead forms for like 15 different schools. But that person can get contacted by 6 schools in the morning, and the way those 6 schools made them feel during that initial conversation, they weren't listened to. Nothing was asked about the student. It was all about the school, double barreling of questions. That student can say, you know what, I would never call that school again. But here comes school number 7. They were able to make the connection, make the student feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. And now that potential student would say, you know what, I'm actually interested in touring that school. So I think it's important for advisors to understand it's not necessarily the first person to get to the lead. Whoever makes the communication, the connection with the person. Now, here's where speed to lead optimization will play a role, because 2 different points. One, I think that a lot of schools who are lead rich, you have so many leads that are coming into the campus that advisors tend to take a seat back. And they say, you know what, we have so many leads, there's so many walk-ins that eventually I'm going to hit my expectations anyway. So they're not making any outbound dials. But then on the other hand, you may have some schools who have so many leads, it's not a good capacity for the amount of advisors you actually have. So between interviews and for brick and mortar schools, walk-ins, for online schools, people who are calling in continuously, financial aid appointments, the caseload may be too much for the amount of advisors that you have. So now those leads fall by the roadside And those are actually leads that your advisors want to get in contact with. This is where speed to lead optimization would play a huge role, because now you can grab those leads that are not being contacted, not because your advisors don't want to, but because they don't have the capacity to reach all of those people.
Absolutely. Great point. And I mean, there you go, folks. It's not about first to contact. It's about the first one to establish a relationship, establish a rapport with the leads. And you bring up an interesting topic, which is about being lead rich. And you mentioned about how, if you have limited seats or limited kind of reserved seats for a certain course, and you have more leads and you often meet your enrollment quota, often leads to laid back as advisors. You wouldn't tend to reach out to everyone. And one practical social problem with that is that someone more deserving or someone who was in more need of that program might go unnoticed or might go uncontacted. So this is also a place wherein technology can play a huge role, wherein the advisor does not even have to contact all the 100 leads that came in. Technology can engage and enable them, and the advisor can focus on the ones that have higher intent, or are asking the right questions, are showing the correct actions. So Burke, we actually spoke about this when we met in San Jose. There are limited seats, you have more leads, and enrollment, like filling up the seats, is often not a problem. Do you often see a certain change in behavior with your advisors wherein they're like, hey, I'm hitting my goals, I'm good, I'm meeting my targets? Or are they encouraged to reach out to everyone? How do you handle this scenario of being lead rich with limited seats?
So a couple things that we look at. Well, first is realizing that when you have a portfolio of programs at your campus and you represent, geographically, people live, go to school, and work in that geographic area after, especially in healthcare. We don't have a lot of people coming from the East Coast traveling to California to go to school. So it's live, train, work, geographic areas. So if you consider that, and you have 6 programs at a particular campus, and a couple of your programs are high demand, you're not even putting a lot of advertising dollars out there. It's all search engine optimization, referrals, etc. And you've got 5 times the number of inquiries and candidates for the available seats. If you don't get to those people, what is the net impact? And it might be a net impact in the community going, yeah, I wouldn't talk to Gurnick. I tried and they just didn't get back to me. They didn't seem to care. I had to go elsewhere. What program are you interested in? Well, I'm interested in a different program. If that's how they treated you, maybe that's how they're going to treat me once I start going to school there. So I don't know. So
Great.
inadvertently, you could be hurting enrollment in other programs through not properly addressing that. And again, in a lot of those programs that are in our world, at least, a lot of those programs are highly technical programs. People are coming to the table with prior education, etc. And so it becomes a very different, like, you're not motivating them. You're not doing a lot of things. A lot of people really know what they want at that point. They understand the expectations, etc. So it's incumbent upon you to make sure they have information at the right time, and that they're not getting ignored, that they can reach and get some specifics on their own with the self-research or with a self-serve environment. And I think Kathy spoke about this. You've got to meet these leads with where they're at. And so in again, those high demand programs, meeting them where they're at is making sure that they've got the right type of information available to them pretty much 24/7. And again, a more motivated lead for sure for that type of an environment. So making sure they have access, all the time to that information, and making sure that you have ways to get them connected with you, based on both timetables, but it becomes a more of a challenge at the admissions level at the campus. If you've got 250 people that want to get into your next program, how do you deal with this? So you have to have strategies to make sure that they're feeling taken care of. And sometimes you can do that with a more technical advisor that is maybe supporting the on-campus team with more of a virtual team, so that they're more flexible with being able to reach out, answer questions, etc. So that's what I would say.
Great. Thanks, Burke. I think great point for our poll too. So the audience will see the poll too coming up shortly on their screen. And in the meantime, I want to do a very quick fun section. We've all seen kitchen nightmares right now. I'm calling this admission nightmares. I would love to hear a story, a nightmarish story on during your admissions experience with your advisors or directly. Let's start with K.A.T. You have worked with a lot of advisors. Let's hear some admission nightmare stories.
Okay, first of all, this goes into not jumping the gun. And what I realize is so many advisors, they make assumptions as to what may be a concern to some students when they're just asking simple questions. So I was listening to a call one time, and all the student asked was, how much is your tuition for a said program? This advisor jumped into, oh, we're going to get to that a little later. Okay, what I want you to understand is that we offer financial aid to those who qualify. This is going to be the length of the program. If you want to set an appointment to come in and talk to financial aid, we can get you right in there with them. You want me to transfer you? The student is like, hold on for a second. I'm only asking because I want to pay cash. My grandmother started a fund for me when I was small, and I just want to know the cost because I'm going to be paying the tuition in full. And so much time was wasted, and it makes you look desperate. You know, a student, sometimes advisors have the tendency to address objections that are not even objections. They put everyone in the same pool. So the minute that they hear something, they're like, oh my gosh, this is the problem. And they start addressing it. And that's not the problem at all. It was a simple question. You know, and I've heard this so many times within my career. But I have another one a little later.
Great, that was a fun. Burke, let's hear one from you.
I've got many over the years. I think one that you know, as you grow as an institution, ultimately what comes with growth is, you know, more positions needing to get filled and turnover. So you get a lot of newer people that they just want to demonstrate everything that they know all the time to the person who's and listening to you know, this one call, just a complete random I'm going to listen to a call. And it was interesting. They asked about our program, and our newer advisor got on their Apple box, which they put in the town square. They stepped on the Apple box and they started talking all about that program to this person who asked about vocational nursing. Well, she didn't take a breath for probably, I want to say, 6 minutes. It was amazing. It was a complete information session, like, for sure, with no questions, no anything. And at the end of that 6 minutes, the person on the other end of the line said, yeah, I was actually just inquiring about teaching at your institution. And I was, oh, okay, well, you've certainly given a flavor of what admissions seems like to this potential faculty member who is considering us as a prestigious institution. And I'm like, wow, 6 full minutes before finding out that that wasn't the intent of the call at all. Anyway, that was yeah, there was some good training that went on right after that, and a couple of good chuckles and a couple of people going, "Oh, that was so cringeworthy." But you know, it is what it is. It happens, like I said, as you grow. But that is all part of the training, and people can just, you know, step into what they think pretty quickly if they don't get continuous feedback and develop.
Absolutely. That was fun. I mean, I'm sure you guys have a lot of other stories. We could probably do a couple of hours of webinar on that itself. But thanks for sharing that. And now we come to one of the topics that not just the career training industry, but I've seen industries across SaaS, retail, you name it. I've seen people go through that, businesses go through that. This generation, and when I say this generation, probably counting myself as well, but typically talking about the 20 to 30-year-olds today who are signing up, requesting more info with schools, they have a lot of phone anxiety. They are the TikTok generation or the social media generation, whatever we want to call them, but they just don't want to pick up the phone and talk to the advisors. Conversely, the advisors are also in the same age bracket. So we have noticed the advisors also having some sort of phone anxiety and requiring a lot of training and experience until they become very comfortable. So both sides to that story. And let's start with you, Kathy, because you have a great experience training advisors on how to alleviate phone anxiety. Do you want to tell us what do advisors follow to get over this, and how to handle leads who have phone anxiety as well?
Well, the first thing when it comes to phone anxiety as an advisor, I think this is where a call script or a guide will come in, not so you can follow it verbatim, but so it keeps you on task with the topics that you have to cover. Because our students, they call in and they would go off onto so many different questions. And it's very easy for an advisor to get thrown off to the point where they're like, oh my gosh, what was I supposed to talk about next, right? That's where the call script or guide would actually come in. The second thing is, I think training and role play is so important when it comes to getting away from that phone anxiety. Because a lot of advisors, they don't like to pick up the phone because they're afraid of what they're about to face on the phones. You have people saying, I never requested information. You stole my information. Where did you get my number from? People who are overly disrespectful to these advisors, and you are the one who reached out to the school. So a lot of times advisors, they don't want to go through it. A perfect world for them would be for someone to say, you know what, I'm ready to start now. When do I come in? When is your next class? But there's a lot that advisors have to go through, in the middle part. So I think that the role play is very important, because what happens in a role play, the person who is playing the student, they always play the part of the worst call that they just had, because they want to see how their peer is actually going to address it. And a lot of times you have different people in training sessions who are like, oh my gosh, I had that person last week. I wonder what they're going to say. So it's like sometimes advisors don't take role playing seriously. They think it's a joke. But at the same time, it's a perfect opportunity for you to build those skill set, because this is what they experience on the phone. So I think that the most that they can train to, the different types of conversations and the rebuttals that they're going to have is going to make advisors so much more comfortable when they're picking up the phones, right? When it comes to the student side now, I think a lot of our students nowadays, first of all, they're born into technology. Okay, these students these days, they were born with an iPhone in their hand, an iPad. They have access to so much information that they challenge the advisors too. And sometimes they already know what the process is going to be. I'm going to have a conversation. They're going to keep me on the phone for 30 minutes. They're going to try to get me to take 3 buses and a train to the campus. And I don't have time for this, right? So they just want all of the information up front. I think what's going to help is the minute you get a potential student on the phone, make it about them. Students like to talk about themselves. So the minute you take it away from the program and take it away from the school, and you're just asking questions that are geared towards them and their interest and what you like to do and what this program could do for your life at the end, I think it lessens the anxiety. And then these students don't even realize that they're on the phone with your advisors for 20 minutes talking about the opportunity. But it's just like what Burke was saying earlier, sales versus consumer. The more you can focus on the potential student, the less it feels like it's more like a sales, interaction.
Great. Burke, probably, we are hitting the 50-minute mark. So one last question to top it off. So just summing it up, how do you think we can convert more online leads into meaningful conversations? Now, we have covered multiple topics. We've spoken about the importance of empathy versus following a script, etc. But at the end of the day, once this student does pick up the phone, have they been able to be engaged by our institution? Have they felt enabled? Are they getting their questions answered? Or are they just listening to a sales script? We want it to be a meaningful conversation. And at that point, we don't really want the advisor to be following a script, but rather have an empathy angle towards the student and then eventually get them to enroll. How can we make this a meaningful conversation and not make it sound like a sales pitch, which the student will, of course, see through?
Well, I guess to start off with, reticence to make a phone call or to actually participate in a phone call on the lead side has everything to do with them expecting a sales call. They don't want to be sold. They don't want to be pressured. They don't want any of that. And your advisors are going, I wouldn't want that. So I don't want to pressure them. And I don't, and sometimes that translates into them not actually pushing for a next step in the process with someone on the phone. Instead, well, give me a call if you have any more questions. Oh, it's the, I mean, in a sales funnel, that's the kiss of death. You've just relinquished all of your guidance and power and motivation, right? So it's about how do you get that going in the next possible step. So so that being said, I mean, your question, Piyush, is like, how do you make it as meaningful as possible to keep that engagement going? Is that more what you're asking, or?
Yes.
So yeah, once again, this kind of leads into the kind of the nightmare stories, but also how to kind of address it. But some of the nightmare stories I've also witnessed is someone on the front end making a phone call, doing a very good job of not a script, but a framework to understand about different parts of that lead's life and what led them to this interaction with us. And then that person basically getting handed off to someone at the campus who in turn did a terrific job with the framework of asking all these questions of this student again, or prospective student, only at the end to go, okay, I just went through this exact conversation yesterday with the person that you work with, but there weren't any notes in the CRM.
Oh,
And so they go, well, unfortunately, I have to ask these questions again because I need to understand and help you. So please bear with me, and you go cringeworthy, right? So, but yeah, again, these people really need to know that you know what their situation is with every single bit of information that they're providing you, with every single bit of intent and activity that they've engaged in, and going even one step further, trying to understand that there are probably only about 4 real profiles of a lead that you really need to understand. You've got the person who is detail and technical oriented. You've got the person who is more emotional and really wants to feel what this is going to feel like. But to the degree that you can understand who it is you're talking to, and then have your framework and talk to that framework to that type of individual, they really feel you. They really do. No, not the easiest thing to embed and train in an advisor, because you're talking about multiple skill sets here, but it also talks about how important your training is and how important your screening is to find the right people with the right relevant skill set that you can train as admissions advisors. Because it's not necessarily going to come via, hey, I've got 5 years of experience and I'm really good at this. I'd like to work for your organization. That doesn't happen. So yeah, that I think the front end and how to understand who it is you're talking to, having a good framework, making sure that you are hitting on the points that are most important to them, and getting them to know that you know where they're coming from as quickly as possible.
Great. Great session and insights. Thank you so much to both of you. But we are 5 minutes to the hour. opening up for Q&A. Let's wait for a couple of minutes. Guys, please use your chat to put out your questions. You can also use the Q&A option down below. We are here. We have a wealth of experience in this room. Please don't shy away. Please feel very comfortable in asking any kind of question related to anything about career training schools industry. So please, we are looking forward to your questions. Why don't I ask both of you a question in the meanwhile, just in case we don't get any questions? K.A.T, any books that you'd like to recommend to our audience that will view the recording or that is currently on the chat right now?
Not books in general, but maybe a podcast that I listen to all the time. And I listen to a lot of Ed Milet. You know, I think he brings a wealth of knowledge when it comes to motivation in business, in personal development. I listen to him probably about 4 to 5 days a week. And I just log on to YouTube, and it really gets you back on track, especially those days where you feel as if, okay, things are just not working out the way that you thought it was going to be. You know, this is really good when it comes to leadership and when it comes to advisors. So Ed Milet, he has a lot of books that's out too, but I just jump on his YouTube. He has a lot of knowledge on there.
Could you repeat the name again?
Ed Milet.
All right. That's a great suggestion. Thanks. Burke, any book, podcast, TV series, anything that you'd recommend to our audience?
You know, it's interesting. My role as, you know, as chief operating officer, I do have the admissions director. I do have my marketing director that report to me more globally, and of course, campus operations, and then of course compliance and on that side. So my world is pretty broad in terms of the things I look at. I will say, I've very much enjoyed this year's contributions by CQ and Jason Altmeyer and his podcasts that he's been doing with you know, important people in the industry, different experiences, competitor to our private for-profit sector, and getting them to talk about their insights, you know, people who are on the government side and what their concerns are about the school environment in general and where they want to take it. I've actually found it pretty informative, and Jason is very good in those particular situations, and getting that information out from people who are complementary to our industry, but also people who are more adversarial, I would say, and really trying to understand their viewpoints. It's a very it's a bringing together of the two sides, which is very different than what we see in a lot of what's going on today. You know, it's you're either on that far side or you're on that far side, and there's no middle ground. But yeah, anyway, that to me, this over the last 12 months, I've had to give Jason a phone call and compliment him on it a couple of times. It was good.
Excellent. I'll have a look at that as well. Great suggestions, guys. And thank you so much. Just wrapping it up. You know, we spoke about the importance of motivation and tenacity in the admissions process, right from the leadership to the advisors. We spoke about the importance of active listening and empathy when advisors talk to leads, importance of establishing trust and avoiding the buyer-seller pitch or the buyer-seller relationship, importance of building quality time with the student rather than just going through the motions. And again, that brings us back to the point of empathy versus script. Also, we spoke about the role of technology and analytics in bettering your, you know, unanswered inquiries ratio. Technology plays a huge role there, including in your speed to lead or lead response time. And just to clarify again, great point, speed to lead is not about first to contact. It is about establishing that meaningful contact, establishing a relationship with the prospect. So also how important it is to engage and enable your leads, and how it hurts the brand image to be laid back about it. Even if, you know, you are lead rich and you have limited seats, Brand image was an important point brought up. And Kathy brought up the point about meeting the leads where they are at and being flexible about it, and the importance of training to alleviate phone anxiety amongst the advisors. Great points, guys. We will compile all of these learnings and takeaways into a beautiful email. We will send across the recording and look forward to our social media post as well. Thanks again to the entire audience, everyone watching this recording. Thanks again to my amazing panelists, Burke and Kathy. It was extremely insightful for me, and I'm sure for the audience as well. So I'm super grateful that you could jump on this webinar. This was hosted by FloStack. I'm Piyush. We are a Lead Squared product. Do check us out and do look forward to our email. Thanks again, everyone.